The station floated quietly in space, its metal walls reflecting the soft blue light of Vidian Prime below. Harmony's Edge had been humanity's home in this sector for 3 years now. Inside the massive structure, 3,000 humans lived and worked alongside 12,000 aliens from across the galaxy. The morning shift was just beginning. Captain Yuna Kim walked through the main corridor, nodding to the various aliens passing by. A tall Vidian merchant bowed respectfully. 2 small Pixith engineers chittered a greeting. Yuna smiled at them all. This was what she loved about the station. Different species living together in peace. It was what humanity had dreamed of when they first reached the stars. She stopped at a viewing window and looked down at the planet below. Vidian Prime was beautiful. Green continents, blue oceans, white clouds. The people down there were farmers mostly. They grew food that fed half the sector. Harmony's Edge protected them and helped them trade with other worlds. "Captain, you're up early," a voice said behind her. Yuna turned to see Dr. Tejo Park approaching with a cup of coffee in each hand. He offered her one. Tejo was the station's chief medical officer. He had kind eyes and always seemed to know when someone needed a friendly face. "Couldn't sleep," Yuna admitted, taking the coffee. "I keep thinking we've had it too easy. 3 years without any real problems," Tejo laughed. "You're too paranoid. That's your military training talking. Sometimes peace is just peace." "Maybe," Yuna said, but she didn't sound convinced. They walked together toward the medical bay. The station was waking up around them. Shops were opening. Children were heading to school. Human kids played with alien kids without a second thought. This generation was growing up differently than Yuna had. She'd grown up on Earth where humans only knew humans. These kids knew the galaxy was bigger and more wonderful than any one species. "How are the new arrivals settling in?" Yuna asked. "The Korthan family is doing well," Tejo replied. The children were scared at first. Humans make them nervous. But they're getting used to us, Yuna understood. Most aliens were afraid of humans, at least at first. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world. Most species evolved on gentle planets with light gravity and no dangerous predators. Earth was different. Everything on Earth tried to kill you. The gravity was crushing. The weather was violent. The predators were nightmares. Humans evolved to survive all of that. They were stronger, faster, and tougher than almost any other species. A human child could outrun most adult aliens. A human adult could lift weights that required machinery for others. Even human medicine was dangerous. The chemicals that cured human diseases would kill most aliens. But humans tried to be gentle. They smiled a lot. They helped their neighbors. They played with alien children carefully, always aware of their strength. Most aliens eventually realized that humans were dangerous but kind, like a big dog that could hurt you but chooses to be your friend instead. Yuna left Tejo at the medical bay and continued her rounds. She took an elevator to the engineering section. The air was hotter here, full of the smell of metal and oil. She found Engineer Hana Choi lying on her back under a massive power conduit, sparks flying around her. "Hana, please tell me you turned off the power to that," Yuna called out. "Of course I did." Hana's voice came from under the machine. "I'm reckless, not stupid." Hana slid out from under the conduit, her face smudged with grease. She was young, barely 30, but brilliant. She could fix anything and often improve station systems just for fun. She was also completely fearless, which sometimes worried Yuna. "Everything running smoothly?" Yuna asked. "Always," Hana said, wiping her hands on her uniform. "Though I've been thinking we should upgrade the shield generators. The current ones are rated for civilian use. Asteroids, small debris, that kind of thing. But if we ever faced military-grade weapons..." "We won't," Yuna interrupted. "We're a civilian station in cooperative space. No one attacks cooperative stations." "Still," Hana said, "wouldn't hurt to be prepared." Yuna made a mental note to consider it. Hana's instincts were usually good, but upgrades cost money and money was always tight. She continued her rounds, stopping by security where Sora Lee was training new recruits. Sora was ex-military like Yuna. She ran a tight ship, drilling the security team constantly. Most of the team were aliens, but there were a few humans too. They practiced non-lethal takedowns and emergency procedures. Boring but necessary work. Finally, Yuna stopped by the diplomatic offices. Minho Kang was already buried in paperwork. As civilian liaison, he handled all the complaints, requests, and problems that came with running a multi-species station. It was a thankless job, but Minho never complained. "Busy day?" Yuna asked. The Draxian delegation wants to renegotiate their docking fees, Minho said without looking up. And the Pixith are upset about the cafeteria food again. Apparently we're not seasoning their meals correctly. Yuna smiled. These were good problems, normal problems. The kind of problems that meant life was peaceful. She returned to the command center on the station's upper level. The room was circular, with windows looking out into space in all directions. Screens showed various station systems all running normally. Her officers sat at their stations, monitoring communications, sensors, and traffic control. Yuna settled into her captain's chair and began reviewing the day's reports. Supply ships coming and going, trade negotiations, maintenance schedules. Everything was routine. Then the sensor officer spoke up. "Captain, I'm picking up something odd." Yuna looked up. "What is it?" "Long-range sensors are detecting multiple contacts. Large ones. At the edge of the system." Yuna stood and walked to the sensor station. She looked at the screen. 12 contacts, big ones, moving in formation. Heading toward them. "Any identification?" she asked. "No, ma'am. They're not broadcasting any signals. They're not responding to hails." A cold feeling settled in Yuna's stomach. Ships that didn't identify themselves were never good news. How long until they reach us? At current speed, 40 minutes, Yuna thought quickly. 40 minutes. Enough time to prepare, but not enough time to evacuate. Not that they had anywhere to evacuate to. "Sound general alert," she ordered. "Lock down all civilian areas. Get security teams to their posts. And send out a system-wide hail to those ships. Tell them they're entering cooperative space and must identify themselves immediately." The alarms began to wail throughout the station. Red lights flashed. People stopped what they were doing and looked around in confusion. The station hadn't had an alert in 3 years. Yuna watched the sensor screen as the unknown ships got closer. They were big as warships, and they were coming fast. "Captain, the ships are powering weapons," the sensor officer said, his voice tight with fear. Yuna's hands gripped the armrest of her chair. Her mind raced through options. Their shields were civilian-grade. Their weapons were meant for pirates and asteroids, not military vessels. They had no chance in a fight. But maybe these ships just wanted to talk. Maybe this was a misunderstanding. "Keep hailing them," she ordered, "and somebody get me a line to the Cooperative Council. Now." The unknown ships continued their approach. 12 massive vessels, silent and threatening, bearing down on the peaceful station. Yuna looked around at her crew. Young faces, scared faces. She'd promised to keep them safe. She'd promised their families back on Earth that she'd bring them home. Please, she thought, let this be nothing. Let them just be passing through. But deep in her gut, the part of her that had survived military combat, the part that remembered Earth's violent history, knew better. Something terrible was coming. The unknown ship stopped just outside weapons range. For 5 long minutes, they simply sat there in space, silent and menacing. Yuna stood in the command center, watching them on the main screen. Her crew was tense, waiting. Then a transmission came through. The screen flickered and showed a face that made several of her alien crew members gasp. The being was huge, with dark gray skin covered in ridges and scars. Its eyes were yellow and cold. When it spoke, its voice was deep and harsh. "I am Warlord Thexicor of the Krell Dominion. This system is now claimed by the Dominion. You will surrender your station immediately. Lower your shields. Prepare for boarding. Resistance will result in your deaths." The transmission ended before Yuna could respond. She looked at her communications officer. "Did we record that?" "Yes, Captain." "Send it to the Cooperative Council. Tell them we're under threat and need immediate assistance." She turned to her tactical officer. "How long until Council ships can reach us?" The young man checked his screen, then looked up with fear in his eyes. "Nearest cooperative patrol is 4 days away, Captain. 4 days. They didn't have 4 hours. Send a message back to those ships," Yuna ordered. "Tell them this is cooperative space protected by treaty. Tell them any attack will be considered an act of war against the entire Council." They sent the message. The Krell didn't respond. Instead, their weapons began to glow. "They're firing," the tactical officer shouted. Energy beams lanced across space and slammed into Harmony's edge. The shields lit up, straining to absorb the impact. Alarms screamed throughout the station. Yuna grabbed her chair as the station shook. "Return fire," she ordered. Their small defense platforms opened up, firing laser cannons at the Krell ships. The weapons were meant for pirates and small raiders. They barely scratched the massive warships. The Krell fired again, and again. Each blast hammered the shields. Shields at 60%, someone called out. 50%. 40%. The station had 12 small defense platforms orbiting nearby. The Krell targeted them next. One by one, the platforms exploded in bright flashes. Debris rained against the station's shields. Shields at 20%. All civilians to emergency shelters, Una commanded. Throughout the station, people ran for the reinforced areas deep inside the structure. Parents grabbed children. Teachers led students to safety. Shopkeepers abandoned their stores. The shields failed. The next Krell weapons fire tore into the station's hull. Sections began to lose atmosphere. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, sealing off damaged areas. The lights flickered. "They're launching boarding craft," the sensor officer reported. Una could see them on the screen. Dozens of small ships, each carrying soldiers. They attached to the station's hull like parasites and began cutting through. "All security teams, this is Captain Kim. Repel boarders. Protect the civilians. Good luck." She drew her sidearm and left the command center. Her duty was to her people now, not sitting in a chair watching screens. Throughout the station, the Krell soldiers poured in. They were massive, standing over 8 feet tall in powered armor. They carried weapons that could punch through walls. They moved in disciplined formations, taking control of corridor after corridor. Sora Lee and her security team met them in the main commerce deck. 30 humans and 20 alien guards against hundreds of Krell. The aliens took one look at the towering soldiers and dropped their weapons. Sora didn't blame them. Fighting was suicide, but the humans fought anyway. They used the station's layout to their advantage. They knew every corridor, every vent, every maintenance passage. They set up ambushes. They used improvised explosives made from engineering supplies. They shot from cover and retreated before the Krell could respond. Sora led her team through a maintenance tunnel. They emerged behind a Krell squad and opened fire. Plasma bolts and bullets tore into the soldiers. 3 Krell fell before the others could turn around. The humans scattered back into the tunnels before the return fire came. In the engineering section, Hana Choi was doing her own fighting. She'd locked down the main power systems and activated every security measure she'd ever installed. Blast doors sealed randomly. Gravity fluctuated. Life support in Krell-controlled areas became uncomfortable. But there were too many of them. Slowly, section by section, the Krell took control of the station. They rounded up civilians and herded them into the main docking bay. Aliens and humans were separated. The Krell seemed curious about the humans, studying them like interesting animals. Dr. Teho Park was in the medical bay when the Krell arrived. He raised his hands peacefully. "I'm a doctor. I have wounded here. Let me treat them." The Krell soldier looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "You may tend to them, but try nothing." Taiho went to work, treating burned and injured people while Krell soldiers watched. He moved calmly, professionally, but inside he was terrified. He'd read about the Krell. They were conquerors from the Galactic Rim. They destroyed 40 civilizations. They didn't take prisoners unless those prisoners were useful. In a side corridor, Junho Nam was hiding in an access panel. He was just a shuttle pilot, not a soldier, but he'd seen the Krell kill anyone who resisted. He stayed quiet, barely breathing, as heavy footsteps passed by his hiding spot. The fighting lasted 2 hours. In the end, most of the security team was dead or captured. Sora Lee was dragged before a Krell commander, her face bloody but her eyes still defiant. The commander seemed impressed. "You humans fight well," he said in rough standard language. "Most species surrender immediately. You killed 300 of my soldiers with your pathetic weapons." "Should have killed more," Sora spat. The commander hit her, and she fell to the ground. But she was smiling. 300. That was something. Una was captured near the command center. She'd been trying to reach the communications array to send one last message. The Krell soldiers bound her hands and dragged her to where Thexicor waited. The warlord looked down at her with those cold yellow eyes. "You are the commander?" "Captain Una Kim, Terran Colonial Service. You've just committed an act of war against the Galactic Cooperative Council. Their fleet will—" Thexicor laughed. It was a cruel sound. "The Council are cowards. They will negotiate. They will pay us tribute. They will not fight." He leaned closer. "I've conquered 40 systems, human. I know how this works." Una said nothing. She was thinking. The Krell had taken the command center, but they didn't know all of its systems. Behind her, hidden in a secondary panel, was an emergency beacon. It wasn't connected to the main communications array. It was independent, powered by its own supply. She just needed to reach it. Dexicor was talking, explaining how the station would now serve the Krell Dominion, how the humans and other species would work for them or die. Yuna pretended to listen. She watched the guards, counted them, calculated distances, then an explosion rocked the station. One of Hana's sabotages, probably. The guards turned toward the sound instinctively. Yuna moved. She was wounded and exhausted, but she was still human, still a Deathworlder. She twisted out of her bonds, dove toward the panel, and ripped it open. Inside was a small control surface. She pressed the emergency beacon activation. The guards grabbed her and threw her to the ground. They beat her, but it was too late. The beacon was transmitting. Through quantum channels that crossed space faster than light, a signal raced toward Earth, 147 light-years away. A simple message coded specifically for Earth Defense Command. Colony under attack, help. Dexicor didn't notice the beacon. He was too busy securing his prize. He left Yuna bleeding on the floor and went to oversee the processing of prisoners. The station was his now. Another easy conquest. Another victory for the Krell Dominion. He had no idea what was coming. Earth Defense Command was located deep underground, beneath the mountains of what used to be called Korea. The facility was massive, housing thousands of personnel and the most advanced military technology humanity had ever created. Very few people in the galaxy knew just how advanced. Admiral Hyun Choi was in a strategy meeting when the alarm sounded. It was a specific alarm, one that hadn't been heard in 3 years. Emergency beacon activation. Colony distress signal. Every person in the room froze. Then they moved as one, rushing to the command center. Hyun was the first through the door. She was 60 years old but moved like someone half her age. 4 decades of military service had made her efficient in everything she did. Report, she snapped. Emergency beacon from Harmony's Edge, Admiral. The communications officer said. Message reads, colony under attack, help. When? Signal sent 4 minutes ago. Travel time 147 light-years. Hyun felt something cold settle in her chest. 3,000 humans. 12,000 allied aliens. All of them looking to Earth for protection. All of them under attack right now while she stood here. Get me details. Who's attacking? What's their strength? The intelligence officer worked quickly, pulling up data. Stand by, Admiral, analyzing. A pause. Multiple ships detected in the system before contact was lost. Configuration matches Krell Dominion vessels. Estimate 12 capital ships plus support craft. The Krell, Hyun said quietly. Around her, officers exchanged dark looks. Everyone knew about the Krell. They were conquerors from the Galactic Rim. They'd destroyed 40 civilizations in the past 50 years. They were brutal, efficient, and powerful, and they'd just touched humanity's children. Admiral, what are your orders? Someone asked. Hyun didn't hesitate. Signal the fleet. All of it, full mobilization. Every ship, every crew, battle ready in 10 minutes. I want a jump formation to Vidian Prime within the hour. All of it, ma'am. I know what it is, Commander. To it now. The command center exploded into activity. Officers scrambled to their stations. Screens lit up across the walls, showing the status of ships across Earth's defensive network. Communications channels opened to orbital stations, lunar bases, and the massive shipyards hidden in the asteroid belt. The Galactic Cooperative Council thought Earth had 50 warships. Maybe 100. They were wrong. Very, very wrong. For the past 70 years, since humanity first reached the stars and realized how dangerous the galaxy could be, Earth had been building, quietly, carefully, using Deathworlder efficiency and Deathworlder paranoia. Every resource that could be spared went into defense. Earth remembered its own violent history. Humans knew what happened to peaceful civilizations when violent ones came calling. Never again, humanity had decided. We'll never be helpless again. Admiral, fleet status updating, the tactical officer called out. First wave reporting ready. 50 ships standing by for jump. 100 ships ready, someone else reported. 150. 200. The numbers kept climbing. Hyun watched the screens. Each light represented a warship. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, battleships, and the new ones. The dreadnoughts, 5 of them. Each as large as a space station carrying enough firepower to level a planet. How long to reach Vidian Prime at maximum military speed? Hyun asked. 4 hours, Admiral. We can push it to 3 if we risk damage to the jump drives. 4 hours, Hyun said. Fast enough. Brief the crew commanders. Tell them we're going in hot. Full combat load. No holding back. A captain across the room spoke up. Admiral, shouldn't we contact the Cooperative Council? Get their permission to mobilize? Hyun turned to look at him. Her eyes were hard. Captain, our people are dying right now. Our colony sent a distress call. We don't need permission to defend our own. The Council can complain later if they want. She walked to the main strategic display. It showed Earth and the surrounding systems in 3 dimensions. Vidian Prime was a tiny dot 147 light-years away. So far, but not too far. Not for human ships. Not for human determination. An aide approached. Admiral, Captain Jisoo Bay is on the line. She's requesting permission to take point with the Retribution. Hyun smiled thinly. Jisoo was the youngest dreadnought captain in the fleet, only 42 years old. She was also the best. Permission granted. Tell Captain Bay she has operational command of the first wave, and tell her to make it count. Across the system, on the orbital station where the Retribution was docked, Captain Jisoo Bay stood on her bridge watching her crew prepare for combat. The ship was enormous, over 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that no alien had ever seen. Railguns that could fire projectiles at 10% light speed, plasma cannons that burned at the temperature of stars, missile batteries loaded with warheads that could crack a moon. All hands, this is the captain, Jisoo said over the intercom. Her voice was calm but firm. We have just received a distress signal from Harmony's Edge. Our people are under attack. 3,000 humans and 12,000 allied civilians need our help. We're going to give it to them. Around the ship, her crew worked with practiced precision. These weren't civilians playing soldier. These were Earth's finest. They'd trained for this moment. Hoped it would never come, but trained anyway. Weapon systems online, the tactical officer reported. All green across the board. Navigation plot jump to Vidian Prime, put us right in their face when we arrive. Aye, Captain. Jump plotted. Jisoo looked around her bridge. Young faces, old faces, all of them determined. We're not going alone. 300 ships will be right behind us. The Krell think they've conquered an easy target. They're about to learn different. She sat in her command chair. Helm, take us out! All ships form up on the Retribution. Let's go bring our people home. The Retribution pulled away from the station, its massive engines glowing bright blue. Behind it, hundreds of other ships fell into formation. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, more dreadnoughts. A fleet that humanity had built in secret, hoping never to use it. But now the time had come. Back on Earth, Admiral Hyun watched the fleet assemble on her screens. More ships kept joining. 400 now. 500. Every available vessel that could make the jump. Admiral, we have assembly complete. 612 ships ready for jump. 612 ships. The largest fleet humanity had ever fielded. More firepower than the entire Cooperative Council's combined military, all of it focused on one target. Give the order, Hyun said quietly. All ships jump when ready. Show them what happens when you touch Earth's children. Space tore open as 600 human warships activated their jump drives simultaneously. Reality bent and twisted. The ships vanished, crossing 147 light-years in the blink of an eye. 4 hours. That was all the time it would take. 4 hours for the Krell to realize they'd made the worst mistake in their empire's history. 4 hours for humanity to cross the galaxy and rain hell on anyone who threatened their people. Hyun sat in her command chair watching the countdown clock. She thought about the 3,000 humans on Harmony's Edge. Thought about Captain Yuna Kim, who she'd personally promoted 3 years ago. Thought about all the families who'd sent their children to the stars, trusting Earth to protect them. Hold on, she whispered to the screen showing Vidian Prime. We're coming. Just hold on a little longer. In the quantum channels that connected Earth to its colonies, a new signal went out. Not a distress call this time. A warning. Sent to every human station and ship across known space. This is Earth Defense Command. Emergency combat mobilization in progress. All colonies, be advised. If you call for help, we will answer. Always. The fleet is moving. Across the galaxy, humans in 100 different colonies received the message. They understood what it meant. Earth had their back. No matter how far away they were, no matter how desperate the situation, the distress signal had been sent. The fleet was coming, and heaven help anyone who stood in their way. 6 hours had passed since the Krell took Harmony's edge. Warlord Thexicor stood in what used to be Captain Yuna's command center, reviewing reports from his troops. The occupation was going smoothly. The civilians were secured. The few remaining resistance fighters were being hunted down. He studied the humans with interest. They were small compared to his warriors, barely reaching a Krell's chest, but they fought with a ferocity he rarely encountered. Even wounded and bound, they glared at their captors with unbroken spirit. "Fascinating creatures, my lord," one of his officers approached. "We've separated the humans from the other species as you ordered. There are 3,000 of them. What should we do with them?" "Keep them isolated for now," Thexicor said. "I want to study them further. Their world is classified as high danger. Perhaps we can use them as soldiers once they're properly broken." The officer bowed and left. Thexicor turned back to the windows overlooking space. His fleet floated nearby, victorious. Another system claimed. Another step toward Krell dominance of this sector. In the detention areas, the captured humans sat together. They were bruised and bloody, but still talking quietly among themselves. Dr. Tejo Park was moving from person to person, treating injuries with what limited supplies the Krell allowed him. "How's Yuna?" someone whispered. "Alive," Tejo replied quietly. "Beaten badly, but alive. They have her separated in the command center." "Did she get the signal out?" "I don't know. I hope so." In another section, Engineer Hana Choi sat with her back against a wall. Her hands were bound, but her mind was racing. She'd memorized every system on this station. She'd built half of them herself. The Krell thought they controlled Harmony's edge, but she had surprises left. She just needed the right moment. The detention bay was crowded with aliens and humans alike. A small child, one of the Korthan species that Taiho had been helping, sat next to a human woman named Yunji. The child was crying softly. "It's okay," Yunji whispered, putting her arm around the small alien. "Help is coming. I promise." "And how do you know?" the child asked in broken standard. Yunji smiled despite her bruises. "Because humans don't abandon their own, or their friends. Earth will come." On the bridge of his flagship, Thexicor was reading casualty reports when his tactical officer suddenly straightened. "My lord, I'm detecting quantum disturbances." "Explain," Thexicor said calmly. "Multiple quantum signatures. Ships are jumping into the system. Many ships. I count 50 contacts." "No, 100. "My lord, the number keeps increasing." Thexicor felt a cold sensation run down his spine. "Show me." The main screen flickered to life. Space itself was tearing open in dozens of places. Ships emerged from the quantum tunnels, warships, big ones. The sensor count kept climbing. 200 contacts. 300. 400. "My lord, they're still coming." "Identify them," Thexicor demanded, analyzing. "Configuration matches Terran design." "My lord, these are human ships." "That's impossible. Earth has barely 50 warships according to Council records." "The sensors don't lie, my lord. 500 human vessels and still counting." Thexicor stared at the screen. The human ships were forming up in a massive formation. At the center was a vessel so large it dwarfed his entire fleet. A dreadnought. And behind it more ships than he could quickly count. 600 contacts. All Terran, all armed. They're taking up attack positions around the planet. Every alarm on the Krell bridge was screaming now. Weapons locks, targeting lasers. The human fleet had surrounded them completely. Then a transmission came through. Thexicor's screen showed a human woman in military uniform. She was older, with gray hair and eyes like ice. Krell Dominion vessels. "I am Admiral Hyun Choi of Earth Defense Command. You have attacked our colony. You have harmed our people. You have approximately 60 seconds to power down your weapons and prepare for boarding, or we will destroy you where you float. Choose quickly." The transmission ended. Thexicor looked around his bridge. His officers were pale with fear. They'd fought dozens of species. None had ever responded like this. Most species negotiated, tried diplomacy, called for council intervention. The humans just showed up with overwhelming force. "Open a channel," Thexicor ordered. His pride wouldn't let him surrender without trying to negotiate. "This is Warlord Thexicor. We have taken control of this station. We hold 3,000 human civilians and 12,000 aliens as prisoners. If you attack, they will die." There was a pause. Then Admiral Hyun's voice came back, cold and hard. "We have already calculated acceptable losses. We have already mourned our dead. Now we're here to avenge them. Your 60 seconds are up. Texacor barely had time to shout an order before space lit up with weapons fire. The human fleet opened up with everything they had. Railguns fired solid projectiles that moved at terrifying speeds. They punched through Krell shields like they weren't there. Plasma cannons bathed Krell ships in fire hot enough to melt armor. Missiles streaked across space, their guidance systems so advanced they couldn't be fooled by countermeasures. The Retribution alone destroyed 3 Krell capital ships in the first 30 seconds. Captain Jisoo Bay stood on her bridge, calling out targets with mechanical precision. Target their engines first. Disable them so they can't run. Then systematic destruction of weapon systems. Leave one ship intact for capture. Her crew worked like a machine. Every shot counted. Every weapon hit its mark. Years of training, years of preparation, all coming together in this moment. The Krell tried to fight back. Their weapons were powerful. They'd conquered 40 systems with these ships. But they'd never faced Deathworlders before. They'd never faced beings who evolved on a planet that tried to kill them every single day, who built their entire civilization around the concept of survival at any cost. Human reflexes were faster. Human tactics were more aggressive. Human weapons were designed by people who knew exactly how to kill efficiently, because they'd spent millions of years doing it to each other. Inside Harmony's edge, the captive humans heard the explosions. They felt the station shake. They knew what it meant. They came, someone whispered. Earth came for us. Yuna, still bleeding in the command center, managed a smile. Texacor was screaming orders at his crew, trying desperately to coordinate a defense. He glanced at Yuna. This isn't possible, he said. No species mobilizes this fast. No one brings this much force for one colony. Yuna's smile widened, showing bloody teeth. You don't understand humans at all. We don't do things halfway. You touched our people. Now you're going to learn what that means. Outside, Krell ships were being torn apart. Their shields failed under the sustained assault. Their hulls buckled. Their engines exploded. In less than 5 minutes, half the Krell fleet was destroyed or disabled. Texacor realized he was going to die. His empire, his conquest, his entire fleet, all of it ending because he made one mistake. He attacked humans. All ships retreat, he ordered. Jump out now! But his remaining ships couldn't jump. Human weapons had specifically targeted their jump drives. The Krell were trapped, surrounded by hundreds of human warships with nowhere to run. Sir, we're being hailed, his communications officer said quietly. Put it through, Texacor said. There was no fight left in his voice. Captain Jisoo Bay appeared on his screen. Krell vessels, you will power down all weapons and prepare to be boarded. If you comply, we'll take you prisoner. If you resist, we'll finish what we started. You have 30 seconds. Texacor looked around his bridge. His officers were looking at him, waiting for orders. He thought about fighting, about dying with honor, but he thought about his crew too, about the thousands of Krell soldiers who would die if he chose pride over survival. Power down weapons, he said quietly. Prepare for boarding. His flagship went dark. Around him, the few remaining Krell ships did the same. The battle was over. The humans had won. The battle lasted 11 minutes from start to finish. When it was over, the Krell fleet was destroyed or captured. Human Marines were already boarding Harmony's edge, moving through corridors with weapons ready. Lieutenant Mina Song led the first team through the station. She was small, barely 5 feet tall, but she moved like a predator. Her squad followed behind her, checking every corner, every room. They found Krell soldiers who'd surrendered. Hands raised, weapons dropped. The Marines secured them quickly and moved on. They found the detention areas next. The doors were still locked. Mina's engineer cut through them in seconds. Inside, thousands of faces looked up at them. Aliens and humans, all of them exhausted and scared. It's okay, Mina said, lowering her weapon. You're safe now. Earth is here. The detention bay exploded with emotion. People were crying, hugging each other, some just sitting down in relief. The human prisoners stood up slowly, looking at the Marines in their armor, at the Earth flags on their shoulders. I knew you'd come, someone said. I knew Earth wouldn't leave us, Mina smiled. Never. We always come for our people. Dr. Tejo Park approached the Marines. We have wounded. Many wounded. I need medical supplies. Already on the way, Doctor, Mina replied. We have hospital ships inbound. The seriously injured will be evacuated first. Throughout the station, more Marine teams were securing areas and freeing prisoners. They found engineer Hana Choi trying to fix a jammed door to release more captives. A Marine helped her, and together they got it open. Took you long enough, Hana said with a tired grin. Traffic was bad. The Marine replied, "You know how it is." They found Security Chief Sora Lee unconscious in a cell. She'd been beaten severely but was alive. The Marines carried her out gently and called for immediate medical attention. Captain Yuna was found in the command center, still tied to a chair. Thexacor stood nearby with his hands raised, Krell guards surrounding him. A Marine team secured the Krell, then rushed to free Yuna. "Captain Kim?" one of them asked, cutting her bonds. "Can you hear me?" Yuna's eyes opened. She looked at the Marine, at the Earth flag, and started crying. Not from pain, from relief. "You came," she whispered. 4 hours? "You came in 4 hours. Of course we did, ma'am. You're one of ours." They helped her to her feet. She was unsteady, beaten and exhausted, but she refused to be carried. She walked out of the command center on her own feet. Past Thexacor, she stopped and looked at him. "I told you," she said simply. Then she continued walking. Outside the station, the human fleet remained in formation. Medical ships docked with Harmony's Edge, bringing doctors and supplies. Engineering vessels moved to begin repairs. The captured Krell were transferred to prison ships. Admiral Hyun arrived on the Retribution shuttle. She wanted to see the colony herself, to see the people they'd saved. When she stepped onto the station, Yuna was waiting despite her injuries. "Captain Kim," Hyun said, looking at the younger woman's battered face. "You should be in medical." "With respect, Admiral, I needed to thank you first." Yuna's voice was hoarse but firm. "You mobilized the entire fleet for us. You activated the emergency beacon. That means you needed help." "Of course we came." Hyun looked around at the damaged station, at the people being treated, at the bodies being recovered. "We just wish we could have arrived sooner." 4 hours, Yuna said. "You crossed 147 light years in 4 hours with 600 ships." "That's..." She shook her head. "That's incredible. That's what we do," Hyun replied. "We protect our own." In the following days, the station slowly returned to normal. The dead were mourned. 47 humans had died in the initial attack and fighting, hundreds of aliens too, but thousands had been saved. The Galactic Cooperative Council called an emergency session. Representatives from 600 species gathered in the Grand Chamber on the Council homeworld. They'd all seen the battle data. They'd all watched the recordings of the human fleet appearing from nowhere with overwhelming force. Admiral Hyun stood before them via hologram. Behind her, the image showed the human fleet still orbiting Vidian Prime. 600 warships. The Council had thought Earth had 50. "Admiral Choi," the Council speaker began. "The Council must ask, how many ships does Earth actually have?" "Enough," Hyun replied simply. "Enough to protect our colonies. Enough to defend our allies. Enough to ensure no one ever thinks attacking humans is a good idea." A Vidian representative spoke up. The Council was not informed of this military buildup. "Earth signed treaties limiting..." "We signed treaties limiting offensive weapons," Hyun interrupted. "These are defensive forces. We never planned to attack anyone. But we learned long ago that hope is not a strategy. Trust is not a shield. If you want peace, you prepare for war." "The Krell Dominion will demand restitution," another representative said. "They'll claim you destroyed their fleet without provocation." "They attacked our colony." Hyun's voice was cold now. "They killed our people. They threatened civilians. If the Krell want a war, they can have one. If they want peace, they can return to their own territory and never threaten cooperative space again. Those are the only two options." The chamber was silent. Every species there understood what they were seeing. Humans weren't the peaceful, helpful neighbors they pretended to be. They were Deathworlders, apex predators who'd chosen to be kind. But when threatened, when their people were in danger, they reverted to what their planet had made them: hunters, warriors, survivors. "Let me be clear," Hyun continued. "Earth has no desire for conquest. We don't want your worlds or your resources. We want to live in peace and explore the stars. But if anyone threatens our people, if anyone attacks our colonies or our allies, we will respond with everything we have. Not in days, not in weeks, in hours. We will cross any distance. We will pay any price. And we will destroy any threat completely." She paused, letting her words sink in. The distress signal from Harmony's Edge was sent at 0400 hours. Our Armada arrived at 0800 hours. 4 hours to mobilize and jump 147 light years. Remember that. Remember that humans measure response time in hours, not days. The hologram shifted to show footage from the battle. Krell ships being torn apart, human weapon systems that shouldn't exist in civilized space, the overwhelming, brutal efficiency of a species that evolved to kill. Stand with us, Hyun said quietly. And you'll never stand alone. We will defend our friends as fiercely as we defend ourselves. Stand against us. She gestured at the destroyed Krell fleet on the screen. Well, you've seen what happens. The transmission ended. The council chamber erupted into discussion. Some species were frightened. Others were relieved. All of them understood the galaxy had changed. Back on Harmony's edge, life continued. The station was being repaired. The civilians were recovering. Children were going back to school. Shops were reopening, but things were different now. The aliens looked at their human neighbors with new understanding. They'd seen what humans really were. Not the friendly shopkeepers or the helpful engineers or the smiling diplomats. Those were masks. Underneath was something far more dangerous. A young Korthan child approached Yuna in the common area. It was the same child who'd been crying during the attack. The one named Pip that Yunji had comforted. Captain Yuna? The child said nervously. Are humans going to stay? To protect us? Yuna knelt down to the child's level. Her face was still bruised, but she smiled warmly. Yes, Pip, we'll stay. That's what humans do. We protect our friends, even though we're not human, especially because you're not human. You're smaller than us, weaker than us. That means you need protection, and humans protect those who can't protect themselves. It's who we are. The child hugged her, and Yuna hugged back carefully. Around them, other aliens watched. They understood now. Humans were dangerous, but humans were also loyal. If you were their friend, they would move mountains to keep you safe. That night, as Yuna sat in her newly repaired quarters, she looked out at the human fleet still orbiting. Slowly, ships were starting to return to Earth, but some would stay. A permanent garrison, a reminder. She thought about the Krell, about Thexicor's face when he realized what he'd done, about how quickly everything had changed from his certain victory to complete defeat. The galaxy had learned a lesson. You could fight humans. You could even kill humans. But if you threatened their family, if you touched their people, they would come for you with terrible swiftness and unmerciful force. The distress signal had been sent. The Deathworlder Armada had arrived instantly, and the galaxy would never forget.